Alrighty, howdy y'all. My name is Oliver Dahl, and I'm a photographer and writer from Boise, Idaho. And today I'm going to flip through my latest photo book, Wendover. So I've never actually done a video quite like this, or really taken an opportunity to talk extensively about my photographic work, but I thought this might be just a fun way to share some of my favorite photos from this photo book, and also talk through some of the curation and sequencing decisions that I made to help the book kind of come to life. So I hope that it helps you appreciate Wendover even more, and also just help you start to think more critically about other photo books that you might have. So let's get into it. So I guess first of all, Wendover is actually a sequel. Earlier this year I actually published a similar photo book about the small town of ARCO, Idaho. It's actually the first city in the world to be lit by atomic power. So it's this old town kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's got all these cool space age, Cold War era neon signs and motels and things like that. And it's nestled right by Craters of the Moon National Monument, which is just beautiful. And yeah, it's just got this fantastic small town USA quirky character that I just really love. So before I actually even started working on ARCO, I knew that I wanted to do a series of photo books about different small towns all across the nation, and maybe even the world someday. I think that'd be cool. So I've had my eye on several different small towns, having thought about, what potential sequels might be. And it was actually around this time last year, my friend Jeremiah and I went to the Bonneville Salt Flats for a day, and we basically decided, hey, you know what? This Wendover town is 10 minutes down the road. Let's cross into the Nevada border to say that we did, grab some dinner, and head back home. And so we figured, why not? And we took the extra 10 minutes to go visit Wendover and check it out. And it was kind of love at first sight, which is kind of funny because I don't think that's something that gets said about Wendover very often, because the first thing that you really see as you're driving in is this series of old, kind of decrepit looking motels, one after the other on the side of the road. And I don't know what it is about old motels, but I think just the kind of liminal, nostalgic feel that they have just kind of speaks to me. And so I don't think we even made it, halfway through town to the Nevada border before I knew, okay, this is going to be the next book after ARCO, which is a really cool feeling. And then to know that, or to have made that decision, and then to see Wendover Will towering over me and waving and pointing at the city, it felt like a sign. Big ol' neon sign. So I ended up making 5 different trips to Wendover over the last year, at least one trip during each season of the year. So I've got photos with snow on the ground, flowers on the trees. I just kind of love that that consistency, or that representation of this one place throughout a whole year, rather than just going once and getting as many photos as I can. I think it adds a lot to the book. So anyway, now, just barely over a year later, here we are with a whole photo book about this town, and it's crazy, and I love it, so let's crack this book open. So here we have the title page, which is nothing fancy really, just kind of a digital tracing of a historical photograph of Wendover Will. Apparently his base used to read "Where the West Begins," which seems a little bit bold to me, saying that the West begins after you drive through Utah, but I don't know, they didn't stick with it, right? So then it also shows the state line, which actually divides the town of Wendover into 2 different cities. There's Wendover, Utah, and then West Wendover, Nevada. And each town actually has its own fire department, police station, and so on. And because gambling is illegal in Utah, but legal in Nevada, the casinos are actually built right up onto the state border, which makes for just kind of a fascinating, honestly really funny dynamic, right? So then the first image of the book is this 35mm film photo of a statue of Mary standing outside of a church just barely on the Utah side of town. And I think it really helps build the theme of the book. I mean, obviously it's largely about this state border running through the town, and how that both divides and connects the two into this single place. But it's also really about borders generally, right? About how all borders both separate and connect. So this picture is sort of a metaphor of a spiritual kind of border, I guess. This fence here representing a feeling of distance or separation from divinity, from holiness, from God, feeling separated from that. And also sort of the yearning that naturally comes where we feel this desire to cross that barrier, to communicate with holiness, to become more holy ourselves, And I think that that's just a really powerful contrast from this idea of crossing the border to try your hand at blackjack, you know. And so the theme of the book is also really to ask why we're on this side of the fence at all, and why, or I guess, and whether what's on the other side of the fence is worth chasing. And in fact, the back cover is sort of a reference to that too, and a pun all in one, right? There's this phrase, "the grass is greener on the other side." So I tried to represent that here, kind of saying that, hey, the grass is greener on the other side of the book. That's okay, maybe it's a little bit dumb, but when you think about it, like, sure, yeah, the grass is pretty green on the other side here. Maybe scary green, but that's not all that matters, right? You can't really munch on this faded, torn astroturf. So, I don't know, there's some metaphors and some symbolism to think about with that, maybe. So this next spread is one of my favorites, and, well, actually, you'll probably hear me say that a lot. I have a lot of favorites, because I narrowed the book down from several thousand photos, both film and digital, to just 69. And actually, maybe I'll say 70, because there's a photo of me in the back. Let's go with 70. But anyway, these pictures here were both taken during my winter trip to Wendover, and this page was really just first laid out aesthetically, right? The oranges of this wall and the baseball diamond are really just beautiful together. But as the theme of the book developed, and I had to sort of defend every photo, I thought that this image of the baseball diamond actually really fit well with that theme. So again, we have this fence, and what is it separating? Most of the time, right? A baseball game from the spectators. And to kind of get meta with this, I guess, the way I think about it is that whoever's flipping through a photo book is kind of a spectator of sorts, right? And the photos themselves are the spectacle. And I hope that, kind of like a baseball game, the viewer is able to engage with these photos and help them become what they are, help them be a part of this spectacle. So with that invitation to the viewer, this first photo then invites them to dive right in to the rest of the book, and then also to kind of brace themselves for things that might contradict their expectations. This second photo is actually of the same church as the Mary statue, and once again there's this fence, this big red line separating me in this scene from the actual doors of the church. The scene itself is beautiful though, and I love the colors and the geometry. I like that shot a lot. So these two shots are also kind of more of an aesthetic pair than a thematic pair, although I really like the contrast between the bright yellows of the hotel and the desert in this first photo, and then again the bright yellow and actually this dark hallway here. It's just kind of ominous, and it stands out from the yellow. And here's a 2-pager and another fence. This one just separates the RV from the cool purple car, and I think the state line actually runs back behind their property line a bit, and it shows how the town is really just built right in the rocky desert. It also shows this kind of separation of both property and kind of two different lifestyles, right? These are the first photos in the book taken on the Nevada side, actually, and again we have this display of contrast between the man-made and the desert, and another cool car. Here we have one of the very few photos of people in the book, and it's intentionally positioned next to this photo, reminding us again of that original theme of borders. It says no trespassing, but it's been beat up and it's not hanging up anymore, which to me kind of tells me there's been some trespassing, or some kind of crossing of a boundary, right? And I don't think it was this guy actually, right? He was just waiting for a cab or something. But he looked kind of dejected, sitting outside of a casino all by himself in the parking lot. And so I'm definitely reading into the scene way more than I need to. But the story here, to me, is that for him, crossing the state line did not yield the jackpot that he was hoping for. Or kind of the moral of the story that sometimes, you know, crossing a line can lead to disappointment, and it doesn't always pay off. So these two are another aesthetic pair, taken in the same general area, actually a couple of minutes as the last two photos. Kind of this idea of people watching for trespassers, and again that idea of the grass being greener on the other side, this plastic turf looking a lot greener than the desert, but at the same time there's this actual tree sprouting real green leaves of its own, so there's kind of this, I don't know, cool contrast there of fake life and real life, the man-made and the desert, so it's interesting. This image is more actually documenting COVID's effect on Wendover, which is a part of the book, right? It's about this town, it's about borders and boundaries, but it's also, I mean, all of these photos were taken while COVID is having a huge effect on the town. And if you look really closely on this door, you can see a pretty creative mask mandate, which I thought was pretty funny. And this white pole just kind of divides the scene in two, and kind of a weird natural sort of separation. And then the second photo was taken by that same church as well as that first photo, looking out across the driveway at this house that was across the street. And I just really love the composition there. It's a good photo. There's this contrast again of the man-made and the desert, but this one kind of also identifies some similarities, right? Both the house and this mountain cast a shadow, and both of them are helping preserve this snow. I don't know, I think it's beautiful. Alright, and I think this single image probably represents the theme of Wendover to me the best. Again, on the other side of this fence, or the state border, we have this bright, colorful, flashy, fun, bouncy house, which I think of kind of like representing the casinos. But everything else around the casinos or this bouncy house looks pretty normal, pretty gray, pretty brown. Nothing special. It just makes the bouncy house or the casino stand out against the landscape even more. I don't know, just kind of something fun is fleeting and temporary. The magic life that you see on the other side of the fence isn't always as magic as you think it is. And then this image is just kind of fun. These two dogs were barking at me as I was walking back to my car. And I didn't notice the Alaska plates on the RV until I was editing the shot. And it just made me wonder what the story behind it was, right? Like, how did these two dogs from Alaska end up in Wendover, Utah? I don't know, makes me wonder. We've got some more fences and people's yards this time. Kind of the contrast between the trees here is really interesting to me too. Got some more fences, more neighborhoods. This is a fun one. These curtains kind of exist without context, and they're actually from a hotel room that I stayed in. And really, I think a curtain is kind of like a fence or a barrier, right? Separating a view between the inside and the outside. And having the curtains closed at night felt safe and private, and that kind of separation was important. I really liked how they turned out on this expired slide film that I was shooting that day, and really how well the colors match this next photo, which is a shot of a really tasty Mexican restaurant that I've stopped at a couple times. They have all these framed photos on the walls of races and cars on the salt flats, and what's in focus in the photo is actually the salt on the table. So it's this first kind of hint or foreshadowing of the kind of photos that are going to happen later about the salt flats, right? And then bam, subverted expectations times 10, right? Like, what is this? Scuba divers out standing in the middle of nowhere? This may actually be my favorite photo in the book. I don't know that it's the coolest or the best or the one that I would hang up on my wall, but for me it's probably the most rewarding photo in the book. I found out on Facebook that there's going to be this underwater Easter egg hunt at this geothermal lake south of Wendover, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, that is got to be the craziest thing I've ever heard. I have to go there and photograph it. And so I had it on my calendar for months, and woke up so early to drive 3 hours out into the Utah Nevada desert to be there in time to catch this. And I'm so glad that I did. But I asked these two guys if I could take their photos. They were walking out of the lake back to their cars. They kindly agreed, and I took this photo, and I just love it. Just the wildness of it. It makes no sense. There's so much to comprehend and really no clues as to what's going on, which is, I don't know, I think that's cool. This one's another favorite photo from that day, and there's again kind of this separation, this time of air and water. This one's fun. The sparkles make the water look pretty inviting and magic. It becomes this sort of portal. There's no longer this really clearly defined boundary between air and water. This portal sort of lets people go from one space to the other more easily. And this second photo is just from the parking lot, and I liked it a lot. I think that's about all I have to say about that one. Alright, this is another photo from that day, showing that in this case, like, it takes some real preparation and the right gear and so on to successfully transcend from one space into the other, right? Sometimes it takes some preparation. One of the coolest things that I learned about Wendover, which I don't think I actually learned until probably my second trip, was that there's an air base there, and that it was actually the air base used during World War II to train the crew that would go on to drop the atomic bombs on Japan and end World War II. Which is just crazy. I never would have thought or known that about Wendover. But it's a really cool piece of history. So here's some photos from that airfield. They seem to be some of the more popular photos in the book, which is really cool because it's a really neat spot. You can kind of see the control tower actually in this photo, and you can even climb up the stairs and walk around up top, which is neat. And also where this photo was taken. Here we have some more fences, so just think about what's being divided and what that might represent in this case. And then I almost got rid of this spread actually. So I really like this green shot here of the back of the museum that's been added to the airbase. But I couldn't find anything that I thought really paired well with it. Ultimately, I decided on the second photo from the top of the control tower. There's a kid riding his bike down here, and obviously this big red obstruction kind of in the middle of the photo, arguably ruining it. But I don't know. I don't actually really remember taking this photo, but in the time since, I've kind of added this meaning of my own, which I guess is what I've been doing all along, right? But it's this kind of big, ugly red thing falling from the sky that to me I've kind of come to symbolize the atomic bombs themselves. Just massive bloodshed falling on civilians and destroying cities. I don't know. I also kind of just like how the photo provides context to the last two of the car and the plane, connects them as being a part of one scene, one place, but also still divides them and holds them separate. This is another one that I feel like encapsulates the theme of the book really well. We have a casino sign on the other side of the fence, or border again, and is it as fun as it looks? No, I mean it's kind of a neon sign graveyard over there. It's sad. And on the other side of the fence, this side, it's where life is lived, right? This is just an apartment complex that I stumbled into. Now I talk a little bit more about gambling and the casinos, kind of provide some history. So these next four photos actually all kind of go together. I didn't want to pair these two tunnel photos together, because I kind of felt, I don't know, too obvious, but honestly they really didn't match very well next to each other. But it's kind of really the point of the book, right? Like, in real life, these are two sides of the same tunnel. They connect these two casinos and reach out over the road towards each other. But yeah, totally different carpet, different architecture even. It's kind of crazy. And I think, yeah, it kind of subtly hints at kind of that idea of contrast of two sides being vastly different. So this is another fan photo, or fan favorite photo. The symmetry I think is really fun, and the colors. To me, what stands out is all the people, right? Like, the book up to this point has been pretty quiet. You don't see a lot of people, and that's not because I'm photoshopping them out, right? Like, up to this point, Wendover was a ghost town, right? I see these parking lots full of cars, but would never see people. So when I finally went into one of the casinos, I was like, oh, here's all the people. This is where they've been all along. And then we have a return to silence. Kind of after the cigarette smoke and after the music and the casino sounds, we're back outside, and it's nighttime all of a sudden, as if the rest of the day has been wasted away. So this was actually taken on that very first trip to Wendover. Handheld, Portrait 160 at night. Really kind of a miracle that it turned out as well as it did, but I'm so glad that it worked out, because it's one of my favorites in the book. Kind of more silence. We have earth and sky, and the first real reveal of the Bonneville salt flats in the book. I think it makes for a pretty majestic entrance. We have some history. Indigenous people lived here for thousands of years. There was a giant lake here long before them, and now we just kind of shoot movies and race cars out there. So these two are some 35mm film photos from the 2021 Bonneville Speed Week. So every August, if the conditions are right, people will go out there and try to break speed records on the salt flats with their cars and motorcycles and rocket-powered cars. It's pretty cool, kind of like something out of Mad Max. This is a frame of 35mm film and then a medium format film shot. I kind of broke my traditional centered position here so that I could line up the horizon lines in these two photos, and I actually really like how that turned out. So this 2-pager is another favorite of mine, another medium format film shot, kind of showing this transitory state of the driver either going into or coming out of the car. From the photo alone you can't really tell, and I think that that kind of speaks to the theme a little bit. Man, I guess I'm heavier with the film photos in the back of the book. So these are 2 more medium format film shots. I don't usually mix the day and night photos like this. You may have noticed kind of at the start of the book, it's mostly shots of the day and morning, afternoon. And as we get closer to the end of the book, I kind of put more of the sunset and night photos. So the whole book kind of transpires like a day. But in this case, man, the blue lens flare in this shot matches the color of the car just so well. And yeah, I think I just saw these 2 photos sitting next to each other and knew that, man, okay, they've got to be a pair in the book. That just looks so good. And I love the kind of liminal nature of the empty parking lot. It's for a casino, so usually at night, right, it would be full if the town was open and could have events and whatnot. So again, it's a beautiful photo, right? We have these light trails in the back from the cars on the freeway, but it again kind of sort of alludes to the effect that COVID's had on this town. And man, another favorite spread. The purple I think is just so different from what we've seen in the rest of the books up to this point. And these were taken a few minutes, maybe even a few seconds apart from each other. The pool here just kind of felt like this portal to or from another world. And man, I love this one too. It's kind of the stairway to heaven out in the desert, and this bare tree juxtaposed against the cement and the landscape. I think it's beautiful. I can't really explain why I like it so much, but I don't know, I think the colors are rich, and there's so much context left intentionally out of the photo that it kind of becomes its own abstract world. This photo of a truck driver working out is another favorite of mine. I think the sunset was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. The way that it reflects off of the white salt is just unreal. And here's this guy, just working out, doing his routine. You know, I don't know, I think that's cool. Good for him, you know? And then this photo was actually taken during my final trip to Wendover. So I actually camped out next to a bunch of the Speed Week guys, just off of the salt flats, and the stars were just incredible. Okay, and this is another favorite pair of mine, dang. So the bright orange of the 2 is just beautiful. And both of these were taken on that same roll of expired slide film that the curtain shot was taken on earlier. I think more than just the obvious pair of colors too, I love how the white crust or veins in the salt kind of match the telephone wires against the bed in the second shot. They're both just very texture heavy too, so they pair together really well. Then these next couple of photos are more that I took on that very first trip to Wendover, just working with what limited light we had left in the day. I don't know, even though I took a lot more photos of each of these motels on later trips, I never felt like I was able to match these from that first trip. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just the sky. I don't know. I'll say it was the sky. And I love the contrast between the desert and the building again. And in this shot I love the billboard in the back, and really how the cracks in the pavement here sort of mirror the branches of the tree. There's a light on inside. Man, just what a beautiful scene. Then it's probably hard to see here, but the door to this particular room is just wide open. There's a bare bed in there, and the rest of the room is just about empty. I was kind of scared somebody was going to jump out at me. It was a little creepy, but I just love how these pair together. The colors are gorgeous. Then this is that same hotel. I think their sign is a bit out of date. And this one was taken of another hotel down the road, taken out of the passenger seat window as we were driving by. This is one of my favorite compositions in the book, I think. And I just love the Rocket Boys written on the mountain up here, Coke machine, kind of this hint of a pool over here. It's actually the same pool that was filled with snow that I have a photo of at the start of the book. And then I think this photo gets kind of slept on. We stopped at this eastbound rest area really quick after our first trip heading home, and someone else was there walking their dogs, and I realized pretty quickly that these dogs were going to walk right in front of the rest area itself, in front of these lights. And so I scrambled to take the photo, kind of hoping that the dogs would be in it, and they were, and I was so happy that I got that shot. And actually it wasn't until after like finishing and publishing the book even that I realized that this is the second photo in the book that features a pair of dogs. So it's not an intentional curation decision at all, just kind of a cool coincidence that I really like. I think it's cool that there's a pair, or two photos of two dogs in the book. Just kind of cool. Okay, and then we have these four. These are like the crown jewels of my Wendover series. These were all taken on medium format Kodak Portra 160, and I had a tripod this time, so these are all several second long exposures that I then went on to color grade a little bit. But yeah, man, these are just gorgeous photos. I'm just thrilled with how these turned out. Really happy with them. And then there's me, and then the casino again, and there we have it. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed flipping through Wendover with me, kind of hearing some of the stories behind the photos and the reasoning behind why I put which photos together. I don't know, I find that really interesting. I hope you enjoyed that as well, that it helps you appreciate Wendover more, that you maybe look at photo books in a different way now, and yeah, I don't know, I think that's all I have for you. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you around.